All right, let's get right into it. Today we're looking at a situation that has the whole world holding its breath. A huge, rapid U.S. military buildup pointed directly at Iran.
So, to kick things off, let's start with the most jaw-dropping detail. Picture this, a 100,000-ton warship, basically a floating city with 90 combat jets, has just disappeared from all public tracking systems. It's gone dark, and this, right here, is the central mystery we're diving into.
So, what is going on here? Well, this first part is all about that one ship, the USS Abraham Lincoln. We're going to track its last known movements and figure out why a ship this big going silent is such a massive deal.
Okay, so here's what we know from the tracking data. The Lincoln was heading west, it sailed right through the Strait of Malacca, and then, poof, silence. It deliberately turned off its transponder, essentially putting on an invisibility cloak to mask its final approach. Now, the source material estimates it'll be in perfect strike position in just a matter of days, ready to unleash a massive air campaign at a moment's notice.
And look, this is no accident. That's not a technical glitch. This is classic OPSEC, operational security. You just don't hide a supercarrier by mistake. The source is pretty blunt about this. It's a textbook move when you're preparing for imminent military action and you want total surprise.
But here's the thing. The Lincoln isn't going it alone, not by a long shot. What the source material lays out is a huge, multi-layered military force that's being put together with, frankly, incredible speed.
You have to think of this carrier strike group as its own self-contained army at sea. The Lincoln is the mobile airfield, right? But it's protected by 3 super advanced destroyers that can knock missiles out of the sky or launch their own attacks. And then, lurking somewhere beneath the waves, totally unseen, is a nuclear-powered sub loaded with Tomahawk cruise missiles, precision-guided and long-range. It's a heck of a package.
And the air power they're bringing to bear, it's just staggering. The carrier itself has stealthy F-35s to own the skies and Super Hornets to hit the targets. It's also got these specialized jets called Growlers, whose only job is to completely blind enemy radar. But that's not all. The source also says land-based planes are moving in too. We're talking B-2 stealth bombers for hitting hardened underground targets and the absolute workhorses, the F-15Es.
Just to give you a sense of what these F-15Es can do, a single one can carry almost 30,000 pounds of bombs. That's more than double what a legendary B-17 Flying Fortress carried in all of World War II. And according to the source, there are 3 full squadrons of these things moving into the region, ready for some serious, sustained bombing runs.
And believe it or not, it might not even stop there. The source mentions some unconfirmed reports, so grain of salt here, that 2 more carriers, the USS George H.W. Bush and the USS Theodore Roosevelt, could also be on their way to the same area.
Now, if those reports pan out, we are looking at something historic. This would be the biggest concentration of American naval power since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Let that sink in. The kind of hardware being moved into place isn't for a small skirmish. This is for a full-blown conventional war on a scale we just haven't seen in almost 20 years.
Okay, so the big question is, why? What's the reason for this insane buildup? The official story, the one you hear in the news, is that it all started with protests inside Iran. But when you dig into the source material, the narrative gets, well, let's just say it gets a lot more complicated.
Here's the public statement from President Trump, which was reported in the source. He said he was holding off on any military strike because, in his words, the Iranian regime had canceled plans to execute a large number of protesters after his warnings.
But here's where things get really interesting, because you have this huge contradiction. The public message is all about pulling back, de-escalating. But at the exact same time, the military actions are hitting the accelerator. The carrier keeps moving, non-essential people are being flown out of key bases, and there are even reports of electronic warfare tests starting over Iran. The source points out that this looks a lot like a classic deception play, saying one thing to lull your opponent into a false sense of security while you're actually preparing to strike.
And you want to hear the real irony in all this? The protests that were the original spark for this whole crisis, well, they were reportedly being crushed by the regime. So think about that. By the time this gigantic military force is actually in place and ready to go, the reason it was sent there in the first place might not even exist anymore. We're left on the edge of a war where the why keeps changing.
So okay, what are the stakes here? What happens if the order to strike is actually given? What does the day after look like?
Well, analysts are pretty much in agreement. It would likely be a swift and brutal domino effect. The U.S. strikes. Then almost immediately, Iran retaliates with ballistic missiles against American bases all over the region. Then Iran's proxies get the green light. You're talking about Hezbollah unleashing its massive rocket arsenal in Israel and the battle-tested Houthis in Yemen hitting Saudi Arabia. This doesn't stay a US-Iran fight for long, it becomes a regional firestorm.
And that firestorm has a global epicenter, the Strait of Hormuz. Get this, a full fifth of the world's entire daily oil supply passes through that tiny little waterway. If Iran tries to shut it down, the economic shockwave wouldn't just be felt in the Middle East, it would be felt by every single one of us, everywhere on the planet. At the gas station, in the grocery store, you name it.
So how big of a shockwave are we talking about? The source suggests oil prices could rocket to over $200 a barrel. A jump like that fast would almost certainly slam the brakes on the world economy, triggering a major global recession. We're talking job losses, businesses failing, widespread economic pain.
And because the stakes are so ridiculously high, it seems like nobody actually wants this fight. Even America's close allies in the Gulf, like Saudi Arabia and Qatar, are reportedly urging caution. Israel has voiced concerns about being ready, and on the world stage, both Russia and China have been issuing some very stark warnings at the UN.
So that brings us back to right now, to this moment. Let's just quickly run through the key signs that have everyone watching so closely.
Okay, let's take them off. The carrier is still dark, its location a mystery. Non-essential personnel have been moved out of the hot zone. Missile defense systems are on hair-trigger alert. The strategic bombers are staged and ready to go. The electronic warfare games have already started. And maybe most importantly, CENTCOM is apparently planning for a campaign that could last a whole month, not just a one-and-done strike.
There's a quote in the source material from a former high-ranking U.S. military official that really just sums it all up. He said the scale of this would be massive, that it would dwarf anything we have likely done in the recent past. In other words, this isn't a warning shot. This is preparation for an operation designed to be completely overwhelming.
And so that leaves us with the one chilling question. Is all of this overwhelming force just an incredibly elaborate, high-stakes bluff designed to make Iran back down, or are we actually watching the final quiet moments before a war kicks off that could completely redraw the map of the Middle East and crater the global economy? The answer, it seems, might just be sailing somewhere out there in the dark, on the deck of a single warship whose location is a complete mystery.